Welcome to my tutorial on making an easy-to-use modular Unity manager that uses scenes. So why would we do this? Well, if we are working on our own project, it allows us to get up and running quickly and easily with a template. If we are working with multiple members, it allows everyone to start on the same basis, the same template, allows them to work easily together. This tutorial is what I have come up with to solve that problem. Thank you all for watching, and if you have any suggestions or comments, please let me know. There are 4 basic scenes and managers that we will be using in the template. So let's go over them. First off is the audio manager. This provides a single source for all music, environment, and sound effect clips. Next up is the event manager. It provides a global event manager that can be used throughout the application. Next is the level manager, which provides an easy transition, a fade in, fade out, and scene management. And finally, the input manager. In our example, it just contains the event system component for mouse clicks and such. However, in a real project, you'd want to extend upon it for whatever input is required for your use case. Okay, so back here in our project, you can see we've already loaded the template. Now, there are some things I want to point out with the way the folders are laid out. In particular, the scenes folder is broken down into a game folder, a global, and a menu. The game folder has the game scenes as well as any scenes that are related, such as the game overlay. The global has our 4 different managers in it. And the menu is the menu that pops up when we first load the game. Okay, so here we are going to look at the audio manager first. I've already opened it up. You can tell that there's one component here, which I've named audio manager. It has the audio manager script on it, and it has the child game objects referenced here. Each child is an audio source that is responsible for playing the audio of its particular type, whether it be music, sound effects, or ambient audio. So I'll go back here to the audio manager script. You'll see that there is a list of audio clips for the different types of audio, be it music, sound effects, or ambient. Right now we have one music clip called menu and one sound effect clip called button press loaded. So now let's take a look at the script itself. So I'm going to open it up here. So here in the audio manager, we see we have a static audio manager instance. This is so that once the scene is loaded, anything can access the audio manager. We have our public components here that reference those children game objects. And we also have our 3 lists for each of the different music effects, or sound effects of clips. The one thing that makes this script unique is this onValidate here. So basically, whenever there is a change made in the 3 different lists, it will run this export clips to text function. And what that does is it writes the names of the sound effects to a text file. And that is so that later we can use it on a component and select the audio clip that we want as a drop-down. This eliminates us having to type the name and remember it, which is kind of nice. So I'll show that in action later. Other than that, there's some basic functions here like play music, play sound, play one-shot sound effect, and so on and so forth. So back here in our project, we can take a look at what that looks like with under the resources folder. We have our 3 different text files based on the name of the list, our ambient names, our music names, and our sound effect names. Right now, only music names and sound effects has something in it. Next up is the event manager, so let's take a look at that real quick. There's not much to see on the Unity editor side. There's just the event manager object itself with the event manager script. So let's take a look at the event manager script real quick. The event manager script is not my own. It's one I got from the web, and I will link to the creator as well as the resource down below. This uses something called the observer pattern. I'm not going to go real in depth into it. I will link to some tutorials down below. But basically, there is an emitter, and here's trigger event, and it will announce when an event happens. And then you have your subscribers, your start listener, or start listening. Your objects that have used this to listen to a particular event name will be notified when that event is triggered, or when the event happens. Okay, we will now look at the input manager. There's not much to the input manager. It has a simple object called event system on it, and it has the event system with the standalone input module. Right now it's just going to be used for our mouse click, our mouse events in our menu component. So there's no actual custom script on this. So it's very simple. Our level manager. So if I open that up here, you see that we have a object called scene manager with the level manager script on it. Then you have two different canvases. One is used for a loading bar that would show up if the scene is taking a while to load. And you have a transition canvas, which is what shows up. Basically, that's what creates that fade in, fade out effect by changing the opacity of a canvas that covers the screen. So right now they're hidden since they need to be activated through code, through the scene or the level manager script. So if I double click on the level manager, we can take a look at it real quick. Okay, so the level manager script, there's not too much to say about the script. It does the same thing we could do in code, just calling the Unity scene manager, except that this allows us to have the fade in, fade it out for scenes for us. So that's basically what the script allows us to do. So now let's see how some of this works in action. So in our scene, we're going to go to our menu and open up our main menu scene. Here you'll see a basic main menu setup with start and credits. We also have two prefabs that I need to talk about now. So the init prefab should be on any scene that you create. And it's responsible for loading in the basic scenes that should be loaded for any scene and any extra scenes that are required for the scene you're working on to work. So in this instance, since we need the mouse input, we let it know that we need to load the input manager scene. So let's take a look at that script real quick. Okay, so here we have our mandatory scenes to load. We go and specify here as scene manager so that we can move from one scene to another scene, and the audio manager so that we have audio. Then we have this list here called extra scenes to load, where we can define as a text string the names of the scenes that we also want. In our awake function, we process through each scene, making sure first it is not already loaded, and if it's not, then we load it. We do this for both the mandatory scenes and then finally the extra scenes. In order for you to load any scene, you need to make sure it's part of your build. So in order to do that, you have to go to File and then Build Settings. You can see here, all my scenes are already in the build. If yours is not showing up here, you need to make sure you hit the Add Open Scenes. So for each scene that's not in there, you have to open it up first, and then go to the File, Build Settings, and then click Add Open Scenes, and that will add them. So as long as it's up here, it'll know that it exists and be able to load it. Another prefab, and this one is optional for the scene, is the music player setup. So both of these prefabs, if you go to the prefab folder, under global, since it's applicable to any scene, you'll see the two prefabs there, and you can just drag it into your project. This one already has it, but let's go over it. Music player setup. So this is if you do want music in your scene. You can select the music you want as a drop down. Your options are none, which would be no music, continue. If you were coming from a scene that was already playing music, this allows it to continue playing. And if you want to choose a different music track, just select the name here. Okay, so now let's look further into how main menu works and some of the other scripts that help tie everything together. So if we open up our canvas, we can see here the canvas panel. We have our start button and our credits button. So that's really where we have our custom scripts attached. So let's look at the start button. So start button has your on-click event as well as your pointer enter event. And what's important to know here is that we have a couple other scripts attached to this, which is a little hard to see, but you have the load scene script right here and the play sound one-shot script. So these scripts are all under your scripts folder under global if you need to reference them. So let's go back to scripts here and I'll show you what they do. So basically both of these scripts, their main purpose is to set a target. The load scene sets the target for the scene to load, and the play sound one shot sets the target audio clip name that we want to play. None of these scripts play or execute, it simply sets the target. In order to play or execute the script, that's done from the event manager up here. So for instance, our load scene, if I click this drop down here, it tells me every scene that I have in my build settings, and I can select the one I want it to load. You can see here there's a list. Now this list is populated basically whenever you have the scenes in your build settings and you hit the play button, it then loads it into here. So if you make any changes, make sure you hit play at least once for it to accept the changes. Now the play sound one shot is similar, except that it works based off that text file earlier that had the audio clip names. So here you can see there's only one, because there's only one audio clip loaded. Now to actually play the sound, if we look at our on-click, what we did was we dragged this script, and I can probably do it again here, over here, and then I select the play sound one shot, and there is a play sound function right here. So this is what actually tells it to, hey, play whatever is the target sound FX name. We also have the option here, play on awake. If this was not something we wanted to play on a button click, but we wanted to play as soon as the object was created, we wouldn't need to do this on-click event. We would just check this box, and that would have it play on awake immediately. Now, load scene is similar, and if I drag this load scene up to our, right here, to our on-click event as well, it does basically the same thing. We select the load scene, and there's a load scene script. So it tells it what scene to load. Okay, so let's see that in action. So if I hit the play button here, you hear the audio because of course we have that prefab music player set up, set to the audio clip menu. And when I mouse over, you hear the mouse over sound effect. As well as when you click, except that when you click it also transitions to the next scene, the audio. Okay, so let's look at another example using the game scene. So if we go under scenes here, and the game, we have game and game overlay. So let's take a look at them real quick. You have the game scene with no prefabs in it, so we'll build it from ground zero here. And let's take a look at game overlay. Same deal. Good. So these are basically empty scenes that we're starting with. So let's start with the game scene. And remember, with any new scene, we want the init prefab, since it will load in any default and any extra scenes that we need to use. So if I go into prefabs global here, I want to drag my init in, and we know it will load the level manager as well as the audio manager. So what else we might need, we're going to have to add here as extra scenes. So for now, I'll leave that blank, and we also are going to want music. This time, let's go ahead and say we want no music. We want to stop the music from the menu. So let's go ahead and go to init here. And what else are we going to want to load? Well, we want the gameplay overlay to be loaded as well when the game's scene loads. So we need to add that here. So we're going to hit the plus button, and here we have to actually type in the name of it, which I think was game overlay. And I'll hit enter, and I'll go back here just to verify that's the name. Yep, that's the name, that's correct. Okay, so that ensures that when I hit play, it should load in game overlay. So let's go and save, and let's see if that works. Okay, so we have our game here, and if we look under here, we have our audio manager, our level manager, which are the two default scenes loaded from the init, and the init also pulled in, we can see the game overlay right here. So it's working how we want. So let's go a little bit further with this. Now we want game overlay to be that overlay that we see that maybe says something like a score. So let's go to game overlay and set that up. So we have our main camera here, and what we're going to want is we want that UI overlay. So we go to UI, and ultimately, let's see, do we want to, let's just do an image first. So we have our image. Now we have an event system that comes up whenever we add a canvas, but remember we also have our input system or our input scene, which pulls in an event system of its own. So not to make things confusing or double up on it, let's go ahead and delete this input system and just make sure that game overlay pulls in the input system if we need it. I don't think we actually need it since we're only displaying anything, we're not clicking anything, so I think we can safely leave it out for now. But if we did need it, we'd want to use that knit prefab here, which let's go and pull it in because we're supposed to have it on every scene anyway. And that'll give us the default, the ability to transition between scenes as well as audio. Although we don't technically need that in the scene, we could leave it off. I'm trying to think if I want to include it or not. Let's include it because in order to test gameplay overlay, we need to actually pull in the game. So we do actually need this because we need to say, hey, we want the game save to come in. So I'm going to save this. Let me double check that's the name of it. Under game, yeah, game. So that way, when we run this and we hit play, it should still work as well because it's going to pull in the game scene. So let me save, and we'll hit play. Let me see if it complains about anything. No, good. So here's our game. So it is pulling in our game, which is what we want. And that has its own init, but that's not going to hurt anything because remember the init checks to see if those scenes were already loaded. And if it is already loaded, it doesn't reload them. So you don't have any problems with having multiple inits. Okay, so let's work on this a bit. What we want to do is we want it to spread across the top of the screen. So if we click on here, I'm going to hold Control, Alt, and Shift, and we see this really convenient stretch. I'm going to use that. And that puts it at the very top, which is what we want. Now we want kind of like that black NES bar, right? That they use quite a bit at the top. So let's do that. Let's use that. And then within this, we want the score text. So let's create that right now. Go to UI. We'll use Text Mesh Pro, and we'll name it score. Let me think. We want to show an actual score. Let's just do. We'll do it all within this text. So I'm going to name this text score text. And image, we'll name that maybe header. That's all well good. Now we're going to need to create a script, and what we're going to do is we're going to show an example of how to use the event system. Okay? So knowing that, we're going to need to... Well, the event system is only going to work because we're pulling in the main game. I'm trying to decide if I want to load the event system in this init or if I want to load into the game. I think we might as well load into the game since it's the main one, and this is loading the game anyway. So let's start there. Let's go back to game. Go back to init. Since we can do more than one, let's go ahead and load the did we call it event system? Event manager, I think is what it's called. Let me go back to the scene to make sure. Yeah, event manager. Alright, so this will load in our event manager. And since our overlay is loading in the game, it'll get the event manager as well. So let's go back to the game overlay. Hit play, make sure we're not getting any kind of errors. Okay, good. And there's our score. So now what we want is we want it to pick up when the score changes from the game, right? Remember, the overlay is just the overlay. The game itself is what's going to have all the logic. So let's go to the game, and let's create a script that updates the score every so often. So we're going to create a game object. We'll just create a game object called score update. All right, and we'll create a new script. And to keep things kind of well organized, we're going to use this scripts in this game folder, and we'll go and create a new script. And this will call, let's just go and call it the same thing, score update. All right. And what we're going to use is what's called a coroutine. So if I go to, it doesn't look like it loaded it. Let me go back. Double click on it. There we go. So this is our new, what we're going to want is we're going to want a coroutine. So let's see, IEnumerator, score, let's call it score tick. Okay, so a coroutine, you can look up an example of how to use coroutines, but basically what coroutines do is it is a loop, but it's a loop that allows the rest of the code to run while the loop is running. If you were just doing a loop, you would get stuck and the whole computer would freeze because there's no way for it to continue executing code while it's in the loop. Well, a coroutine allows it to do that, and that's what this yield return is. So basically, do whatever's within the loop, but also yield back to the main program so they can continue to run. So coroutines are very convenient for that sort of use. So what we're going to want it to do is every 1 second we're going to want it to update the score. Now the score is going to be, let me think. The score variable itself could exist everywhere. I think it's fine for it to be in game. So let's go ahead and do that there. Let's do int score equals 0. And then we can do score plus plus every 1 second. Now the question is, how are we going to let the game overlay know about the update? And that's where the trigger event comes from, the event manager. The first thing I always do when I'm working with the event manager, because the way we are loading things in, we don't exactly know when things are loaded. And if we try to do it immediately, like on start or wake, the event manager might not be ready yet. So let's do another enumerator to wait for the event manager. Wait. Let's see. Wait for event manager. Alright, and I think I've already used this in one of these, so I should be able to just copy the code over. Check. Maybe there's a level manager. I could be, maybe I'm wrong. It's not one shot my actually. Yeah, wait for audio is one. Okay, so it's basically this code routine right here, wait for audio. And we do this right here. So I'm going to copy this. It's not the audio manager, it's the event manager, but it's basically the same thing. So I'm just going to copy it over. Alright, so while event manager.instance equals null, then we just wait. And when we're done, when this is not null, then we were able to use the event manager. And what we want to do is we want to subscribe to an event. So we do event manager dot instance dot we'll go to event manager, see what the actual function is called. Start listening. There we go. Start listening. So if I go back to score updated, start listening. Okay. All right, and it's funny. It's already suggesting stuff for me because of what I'm using. Basically, you need to tell it the name of the function that the trigger that you're listening for. We can name it whatever you want. I'm going to name it score update. And then after that, what we're going to do is we need to name the function that we want called whenever it hears that trigger. And so we can call it the same thing. Let's do void score update. Now the problem is it expects a certain thing in here, and I think I might have to look up what it's supposed to be because I don't remember offhand. So right here, what we put is score update, which is the function we want to run. And let's see, can I convert? Yeah. Alright, I'm going to pause the video just to find a solution because I have it written down in the code somewhere. Okay, so I had that a little bit backwards. What I was doing was I was starting to listen, but this is the score update, which is going to be what's emitting the event, not the listener. So we don't actually need this now. We'll need it later, but not right now. So let's go ahead and comment that out, and I'll probably cut that out later. What we want is we want trigger event. So we want a trigger event, and we can name it whatever we want. We'll do the same thing. It's going to be called score update, so we'll name it score update. And then we can pass, here is very interesting, we can pass as many key value pairs as we want, or we can pass null. It depends on what we want to do. Here's the score. So when we emit there's a score update, we probably also want to emit the score value, so we do actually want this. And it's named pretty good score, and it's going to pass in the score, so that's perfect. So now we don't want it to trigger the event manager here. Okay, so with coroutines, we need to start the coroutine. It's not going to just run by itself. So in the start, we're going to want it to do start coroutine and the name of it. Okay, so then once the event manager is ready, is when we want to start this coroutine. So we can do the start coroutine here, and then here is where we can say, hey, update the score, and anytime we update the score, we're going to trigger that event with the score value on it. So anything listening can update, then may need to update. Maybe you want to do something other than just change the number. Maybe you want to do a sound effect as well. We can do that too. So, and I may show that as well, because that'd be a pretty good example. So let me go ahead and save. We'll go ahead and go back to our main code and see if we hit play if there's any errors that we need to handle. Score update. Well, let's go and attach a script for the doing thing, and then hit play. Okay, good. I don't see anything we need to be concerned about here. We have the game. We were on the game scene, and it went ahead and loaded the game overlay because we told it to in a net prefab. So that's good. That's all working. Now let's go ahead and save this scene, and we'll go back to the game overlay scene. So now this one is where we want the listener to hear when the score is updated. So let's create a empty game object. We'll call this I have to call it listener, or let's just call it score listener. Score listener. Okay. So now here we'll go ahead and go to scripts, game, score update, C# script, score listener. I probably misspelled that. Which doesn't really matter. So put it over here, and okay. So here we kind of want to do the same thing, that we want to wait until the event manager is ready before we can subscribe to it. So let's do that. Start coroutine, wait for event manager, and then enumerator, wait for event manager. Go back to score update. We can just copy that here. Okay. So once the object starts, we'll kick off that coroutine. That coroutine will keep checking for event manager to exist. As soon as it does, we know we're good, and we want to subscribe. And it kind of knows what we want right here. Start listening to score update. Good. And then it's going to call the score update function, which we haven't defined yet. So let's go ahead and define that. I think this will do it for me. Oh, it didn't. Okay, so I'm going to find it. There we go. Perfect. All right, so this is going to be our score update function, which is called, because we're listening. Now, whenever I do the start listening, I want to go ahead and define a stop listening, because otherwise I will forget. So we have a on destroy, and we want to stop listening. Okay, so we'll have that there. So score update results. I hit the wrong button. I don't know why it's complaining about score update. That looks right to me. Cat. That looks right to me, so I'm going to pause, see if I can figure it out, and then I'll be back. Okay, the error went away. I'm not sure if it was just taking a minute to catch up with itself or what. So what we're going to do is we're going to debug log out score update. This score listener, we wanted to change that text. So what we can do up here is we can define a public text mesh pro, I think UUI score text. And what we want to do is we want to change that to the result. So the text needs to be the word score, right, colon, and then the result. So let's do that. So we'll debug log it out, but we'll also set the text. So let's go back to Unity. We should see that show up here. Yep. And I'm going to use the lock so this stays where it's at. And if we open up our canvas, our header, our score text, we can drag it in here. Good. Now I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to go ahead and save. Now remember, since init pulls in the game scene, we can just hit play here. We don't have to go back to the game scene, which is kind of nice to test it out. So let's see if that works. There we go. Every second, the score is changing. So this is a kind of neat way of using this template setup, in that I can load in game without really caring much about what it's doing, but I'll get access to everything that it has. So you can see it work right here. Now let's say we also wanted a sound to play, right? So they scored, we want to hear that sound effect. So first thing we have to ask ourselves is where we want our listener. Do we want it on the overlay? Is the overlay going to be the one responsible for playing the sound, or is the game going to be responsible for playing the sound? I'm not sure what the correct answer for that is. Let's go ahead and do it in overlay, but we could do it in game as well. So let's do, we have a score listener already, so we could probably just attach it to score listener. So let's do that. So we have our score update. So we can do it here as well, and we want it to play sound. So we have that. Let's add that play one shot, sound one shot. We have the button press sound. We don't want it to play on awake. We want it to play when we call it. So go back to score listener, and what we can do is we can grab a reference to that play one shot. Play one shot. All right, and in our start we can load that. Get component. There you go. And from there, we can do a audio manager there's an instance play SFX one shot, and what it wants to know is it wants to know the name, which I think is a string. And this is, I think, is it target? I gotta look at the what it's called. Oh, okay, I can just call play sound. Okay. So I can just call play sound of that. So play one shot. Play sound. That should work because we loaded it up. Okay, so let me go back to the scene and I'll hit play. There we go. Hopefully you hear that sound. I don't think I have the audio capture set up, so give me 1 second. Let me try that one more time. I think now you do it here. There you go. So a great way of using Event Manager and hooking up different things that happen. So that worked really well. Now what if we wanted to change the sound? So let's take a look at that. Okay, so I have another sound clip that I got. If I go to my audio over here, I have it broken down into music and sound effects. So if I right click and open or show in Explorer, I can go into that folder, which you should be able to see here. Good. And I have my downloads folder. Right now we have button press, and I'm going to drag and drop pickup coin, which is in a wave format. Hopefully that'll work just fine. All right, and it should show up here after a second. Good. Now we have to let the audio manager know that we added something to it. So we need to open the audio manager scene. So I'm going to go and save. I go to audio manager, and basically what I need to do is I need to add it to the sound effect clips. Right now there's just button press. So if I'm going to go and hit the lock button to keep this static, and I'm going to go to sound effects, and I'm going to add pickup coin to my sound effects. So now there's two, there's button press and pickup coin. And hopefully with that change, that text file changes as well. So we're going to go ahead and save. And I'm going to see if I can verify if that text file has changed or not. It's on the resources, SFX. Does it let me preview? Let's hope it'll let me preview. Let me open it up. There you go. Alright, so you can see that it has button press and it just added pickup coin. So good, it is working how I would expect. So let's go back to that scene where we want to use it, which is the game overlay scene, our score listener, and you now see it's another drop down. So now if I select pickup coin and hit play, it should play that instead of the other. There we go. If I want to swap it back, it's just a matter of selecting the drop down and play it. So this makes it very easy if you guys are working on a project together, or even if you're working with multiple sound effects or game music, to easily swap it out. So I hope this tutorial has been helpful to someone out there. I will have a link to the file so that you can use it on GitHub. And if you have any questions, please drop me a line. I'll be happy to answer. Or any improvements, I would definitely appreciate it. Thank you all for watching.